Good evening, everyone. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice on 790 KABC Los Angeles. I'm a veteran advocate and an attorney at the Veterans Law Group. And just to tell you a little bit about us, we've been working exclusively in VA disability compensation, representing veterans before the VA for over 25 years. And one of the great and great honors that I have is to work every single day, not only with clients who are veterans, but most of the people in my office are either veterans themselves or family members of veterans. So many of them have been through this process and have been working with the VA, have been to the VA, have been all through getting their disability compensation. So we definitely understand what you guys are going through out there. Here on the Veterans Voice, what I really like to do is a variety of things. Sometimes we have a guest on where I'm interviewing an organization that's helping veterans, talking with people who have maybe an expertise that helps veterans outside of my own. So for example, last week we had somebody who helped with discharge upgrades, who was able to talk to people who are kind of dealing with that. Sometimes we're recorded and sometimes we're live. So this evening we are live and we're taking your questions. I have a couple of topics that I'd like to talk about, but if you're a veteran out there or a family member of a veteran who is currently going through the VA disability process, have some questions, frustrations, just have some thoughts, please feel free to reach out to us at 800-222-5222. You can also submit questions through the Veterans Law Group Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter. Just search for Veterans Law Group. You'll find us pretty easy to find. This evening, sorry about that. This evening, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is just for those of you who are maybe not familiar with the process or haven't gone through the process, start a little bit with the basics. And then again, if you've got questions, call in at 800-222-5222. Love to answer any questions about C&P exams. What do you need to prove to get a 70% Ptsd rating? Any of those kinds of things. But I just wanted, again, to start with the basics of what happens when a veteran gets out of the military and decides that they want to file a claim for disability compensation. Essentially what it is disability compensation is a contract, it's part of the contract that the veteran signs when they join the military, and we as civilians agree through this contract that any disability that they either get while they are in service or it's a previous aggravation, maybe a back injury, that gets aggravated during their service, we agree that we will compensate them for essentially as long as they have this disability. Now, one of the things that I often talk about with veterans, especially when I meet them outside of them contacting our office, a lot of them will say, I don't need to file for disability. I don't really have a disability. We put kind of a stigma to a certain extent on that word disability. So I want to step away from that a little bit and look at what is this quote-unquote disability? Again, it can be an injury like a back injury. It can also be things like PTSD, bipolar disorder that you developed during the military, depression, anxiety. All of those kind of things can happen because of your military service or just happens to you while you are currently serving. So one of the biggest misconceptions is it has to be something that I was doing while I was like on duty. And that's not necessarily the case. I've worked with cases where a friend of mine who broke his foot, he was out for an evening on a weekend, wasn't part of his military service, he broke his foot, had to have a screw put in his foot. That is actually something that while you are working in the military, you had this injury and it'll be compensated. Again, this is Amanda with the Veterans Voice, and we're talking tonight about VA disability compensation. That's what we do in our office. I would love to answer your questions. If you have any questions that come up, please contact us at 800-222-5222. So what's the process of filing a claim? There are so many different ways. One of those things that I laugh about with the government a lot is they almost provide too many different ways to do things. You know, we've got 15 different programs that all solve the same problem. And that's a little bit about how the VA works. Again, you're working with a government entity. You're working with something that is very bureaucratic, a lot of red tape. That's why I do what I do. You'll often hear me say that I wish I didn't have this job because I wish it wasn't necessary. I don't think you should have to hire an attorney to get your disability compensation. But again, I will say that We work only in the appeals department. So once you file a claim and you get a decision, that's when we would get involved. There is a law that states out there that nobody can charge a veteran at all for filing a claim before the VA. There are some organizations out there that I am very familiar with that get around that in certain ways. They do things like charge for a consultation, where you're filing the paperwork, but they're just consulting. There's a little bit of shadiness that goes on out there with that kind of thing. So filing a claim, you're basically going to open a claim. You can do it online. You can go to a veteran service officer. You can fill out the paperwork, sign it, submit it. Really what it comes down to is you're just starting the process to tell the VA, I think I have some injuries related to my service. You don't have to have a diagnosis. You don't have to know what those injuries are. Maybe you just have low back pain. Maybe you deal with anxiety or depression, but you don't know if you have PTSD. The VA is supposed to help you with that process. And one of the things that they're going to do once you submit a claim is they are going to send you to what we call C&P exam. It's a comp and pen exam. One of the great things about working with an organization like ours or a veteran service officer who would be through DAV, VFW, any of those, to file that initial claim is we're going to help you understand what to expect when you go to that exam. That exam is going to do two things. It's going to give you a diagnosis, if you have one, and then it's going to determine, sorry about that, it's going to determine what the percentage of disability is. And so that could be 50%, 70%, whatever it is. So those C&P exams are extremely important, and it can make or break your case. So one of the things that we can do for you, if you would like to reach out to our office, we have like a 2-page download that's about what to expect at a C&P exam, and I'd be happy to send that on to you. You can reach us at veteranslaw.com. So what they do at a C&P exam, again, is to provide a diagnosis. What they're going to do is they're going to fill out what is often referred to as a DBQ. You know, everything in the military, everything in the VA has acronyms. DBQ is a Disability Benefits Questionnaire. And what that is there's one that's assigned to every disability you can get rated for. So there's one for PTSD, there's one for back, there's one for knees. And it tells the examiner, as they go through the questionnaire, how to measure for range of motion, what kind of questions we should ask for, what symptoms you have with regards to anxiety, depression, that kind of thing. So they're a standardized questionnaire that every examiner, no matter who you go to, whether it's at the VA, whether it's through a contractor, is going to fill out this questionnaire, send it back to the VA, and then the VA is going to make a determination based upon that and based upon statutes, laws, regulations, what your percentage should be for each individual disability. And then they do this wonderful thing that we call VA math to determine what your overall percentage is. So to give you an example, 10% plus 50% plus 20% doesn't equal 80% in the VA. It's this calculation, this chart that they do. They've actually created some tools that will help you understand what those are, what your overall rating is. And then once you have that overall rating, that determines how much money you're paid on a monthly basis. And that's really important because that's what comes down to, you know, they're supposed to be compensating you for the lack of how it affects your ability to function in a work environment, that kind of thing. But this percentage becomes really important, not only how much you get paid, but it also can affect some of your dependence benefits. When you pass on from this life, whether or not your spouse gets something. So all of this stuff, you know, if you've listened to the show, you've probably heard me talk about how in coaching veterans through, you know, why do you file a claim? Somebody else needs it more than me, all of that kind of thing. You filing a claim and getting a disability benefit doesn't take away from somebody else, for one thing. And two, it can also like be family planning, financial family planning that can help with that. I understand that we have a caller on, Mike in LA. Are you with us?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I'm on the road. Basically, it was a very daunting process for me Now I'm 100%, 90%, and it's 100% with TDIU. But as I'm thinking about this through the process, and this, I'm curious if I might have a factor that might have given me an earlier effective date. And real quick, basically the first decision came in 2018, in I believe January, and I had filed a claim for, pretty much all the stuff that I had, which included obstructive sleep apnea with CPAP and BiPAP, PTSD, and a bunch of other issues. And they came back at 20%, and I kept coming back, and like I say, eventually, I think in end of 2019 or maybe 2020 early, I came back with the 100% rating. But they denied me basically for the obstructive sleep apnea, which at that time, and you're just tired, you don't do anything for it. And they also denied me for the PTSD, which in the file from the VA psychiatrist at West Los Angeles, and also by my primary physician. And it clearly stated that this had an onset in childhood, and it was aggravated by my service with a reconnaissance squadron. Basically, they were doing things the Russians didn't like, so they shot down one of the planes a couple of years before I got there. But the whole group, the Russians didn't like it at all. And so the only thing I did was nothing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. We're just coming up on a break, and I want to, you were kind of cutting a little bit in and out, but I want to, can you stay with us through the break? Because I want to answer a couple of your questions with regards to sleep apnea and the PTSD. There's one of those things with effective dates. You're dealing with a couple of things. One, when you file the claim. Two, whether or not you continued through the appeal. And three, if you didn't get the appeal filed on time, there's something called a clear and unmistakable error, which it sounds like maybe you were kind of alluding to a little bit. So when we come back from the break, I'd like to address specifically your question, but also help kind of open up a little bit more about effective dates, because they're really important. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice on 790 KABC. We will be right back with Mike in LA. Good evening, Los Angeles. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice. I am a veteran advocate and attorney at the Veterans Law Group. This show is all about being able to highlight organizations that are helping veterans. We often have guests, and sometimes we just do live call-ins like we're doing tonight. It allows me to be able to, as an attorney with the Veterans Law Group, all we do is VA disability claims in the appeals department. So I'm kind of looking at, I regularly have to kind of curve my cynicism a little bit about the VA, because I know they get it right sometimes. I just don't see it, because people are coming to us when they're unhappy with their claim. But if you have a question and would like to call in and speak with me about kind of what's going on with your case, or if you're a spouse or a family member trying to figure out how to get your veteran family member to apply for their case, I've dealt with a lot of those as well. Give us a call here at the station. It's 800-222-5222. You can also submit questions via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We also have a YouTube channel. Just search Veterans Law Group and you'll find us. Again, that's 800-222-5222. And I want to go back with Mike. Before the break, we were speaking with Mike, who's here in Los Angeles, and we were talking a little bit about an effective date issue, a possible effective date issue. And Mike, I understand, just to kind of recap for people who are just joining us, you're at 100% overall. That includes TDIU. Did you say 80% as an underlying, or 90?
No, well, eventually it started off at 20, and I just kept coming back and coming back with the issues unrelated to the PTSD and unrelated to the obstructive sleep apnea, because I assumed, well, it was in the records. They looked at the PTSD thing, and they also looked at the obstructive sleep apnea, and because it was an unknown disease until relatively recently, and even though I had the sleep studies done at the VA and civilian and confirming documentation with everything, I figured, well, I'm just denied it and that's it. So I didn't pursue those. I pursued the other things in my ignorance and eventually got to the 100%. But I feel that in the first decision, as I'm looking back at it, and this is just for general information for everybody, I figured, well, if the VA psychiatrist and the VA doctors all confirmed those conditions, that they were related to the service related, that, I should have been granted the 100% from the get-go. And that's what I was just curious about. And it might help someone else.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the question. It can definitely possibly help somebody else. So in order to get a something that's been denied and you miss the appeals date because, like you said, if you didn't pursue it, and for those of you out here who are listening, that when you get a decision, the general answer is you have about a year to appeal it. There's some caveats to that. There's a couple of decisions that is 120 days. Some of the old appeals is 60 days. But generally with that initial decision, you have 1 year to appeal it. So if you don't appeal it, then the only way to kind of go back and get that earlier effective date is what's called a clear and unmistakable error. And they're really difficult to prove. It really has to be that somebody else going back and looking at the exact same evidence would have granted your case. And when it comes down to, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. As you were speaking, it dawned on me. Actually, I did appeal the obstructive sleep apnea afterwards, and it went up to the next thing. I forget what it was. I'm sorry, I'm going from memory. And and the lady came back and said, well, basically physicians don't write like this, and this is in the opinion letters of my primary physician and the subsequent documentation. And she says, I'm not going to let this go through. And I was really angry at the time. And I said, well, I was going to appeal it. And then I came in and I got the 100%, and I said, the heck with it. But it just, they were very, very condescending. And because it was an unknown disease that later recognized, it just makes me angry. That's all.
Yeah, and completely understandable. And there's been a lot of those over the years related to Agent Orange. Now we're starting to see more of that with the burn pits. Different things that are coming up that are not, in the 70s, 80s, PTSD wasn't really even recognized for Vietnam veterans and that kind of thing. So completely understand the frustration. One of the things that, our office is more than happy to do is we often will take what we call temporary power of attorney, which just means we get access to your electronic claims file. And then we can look at it and see if there's grounds for a clear and unmistakable error. So we'd be more than happy to do that if you want to reach out to my office.
Yeah, sure. Sure, but and there was something. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But with the obstructive sleep apnea, it's very, very exhausting. Period. And it, I know it affects everything. And subsequent to that, after I got out, I got all of the classic, side things you're going to get from that, including congestive heart failure, AFib. And I was in the emergency room for 40 days with all those things together. And, and like I say, I was just upset in retrospect that, the doctor said it, the doctor signed it, the sleep studies are there, and also the psychiatrist had with his PTSD stuff, it was there. And they just blew it up. So.
Yeah, and generally with our office, what we need to do, and thanks so much for calling in, Mike, and I'm sure that your questions can be, definitely help other people, but reach out to our office at veteranslaw.com. There's a button on there that says, see if we can help you, and there's a bunch of questions to fill out, and you submit your decision that you were looking at, and that can help us to see if we can help you and just kind of look into your case. We're happy to do that. We do that for people all the time, so not a problem. But
does that button say the easy button?
It says, see if we can help you. So we're definitely going to check out your case and see if it's something we can help you out with. We'd be happy to do that. If you're just, thanks so much for calling in, Mike. If you're just calling in, or if you're just tuning in to us, we're taking live calls this evening from veterans or their family members talking about VA disability compensation, that process. If you have questions about it, frustrations, things that you're going through, we'd be happy to help. That's all we do at our law firm. You can call us at 800-222-KABC. Again, this is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice, and I understand we have another caller, David in Pasadena. Are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I want to make more or less make a statement rather than ask a question. Can you hear me okay?
Sure, go ahead.
I'm on
I
one
can
of
hear you
them
great.
fancy what they call iPhones or cell phones. Okay, 3 facts about me. First of all, I'm 75 years old. I say that because I sound younger. I'm also honorably discharged first lieutenant from U.S. Army, and I served in Vietnam, 1st Brigade, 5th Infantry Division. And
Awesome.
I worked at the Veterans Administration as a veteran service officer. This was a long time ago, so I don't remember all the facts about the VA. But the VA, 1 out of 10, in my opinion, 1 out of 10 claims are valid. The other 90% are invalid and they're exploited. This is the biggest exploitation of the American Treasury, one of the biggest in the United States today. Let's talk about the gentleman, Mike, who just called. He said he had a sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is a self-induced disease. It's caused by there's people who love their food and they can't lose weight and they smoke. Some of them smoke, some don't. And it's self-induced. It's not service connection. There's no nexus between service in the military and the disease itself.
That's not 100% true, but go ahead.
Back then, the food is not good food in the military. It's high in fats, high in saturated fats. I know that very well. I don't think it is any longer. I was in 1969, so things have changed. But the PTSD, this is the modus operandi of veterans. They're encouraged to go and file a claim, and any kind of illness they have, whether it's a cold or anything else, you want to get it in your folder. So if you look back 10 years previous or 20 years previous, it's in the folder, and there's a nexus, therefore, between your claim and what you're saying this was caused by the military. Now, when you're denied the first time, the modus operandi from is to file an appeal on the appeal, and go to a different doctor. Most of these young doctors in their 20s and 30s are weak sisters, and basically they'll sign off on anything. Now, they're not going to even admit to that or say that, but they just aren't. They're easily intimidated just by a veteran, or they have emotional feeling for them, and they say, I'll give the guy be good in my notes, etc. Mine wasn't the case. By the way, I'm going to admit I got a 20% disability, but I had to work to get mine. I had to go to a very fine general surgeon who did indicate and paid for it myself, who indicated that my condition may have been caused by the incident that happened while I was rappelling out of a helicopter. Now, my statement is this. The VA is highly exploited. I know you're just doing your job, and I'm not condemning you for that. You're trying to make a living, so is I understand all that, and you're playing by the rules. But the rules are so lax, just like they are in the Social Security Administration. It's exploited. It's an exploited system. I mean, I saw a guy who never saw a dead body, but he saw a body bag. His job is loading body bags aboard aircraft. His PTSD, he says, was claimed by looking at the body bags. They denied him and denied him. He continued to appeal and then won.
Right, and David, we're coming up against a break because I just want to address a couple of things that you're saying.
But you can say whatever you like to say.
Yeah, no matter. I absolutely understand that there is fraud that happens within the VA. With any government bureaucratic system, it is. One of the great things.
By the way, I'm not saying it's fraud. I'm saying people are playing, but the rules are so lax that it's easy.
Well, it's not in a lot of cases. There's a lot of people out there who are going to object to that because we work with hundreds and hundreds of clients that have been fighting it sometimes for 20 years. So, but I do want to say just one thing is that one of the great things of working from a perspective that I work is that we take everything on a contingency basis, which means we are very picky about the cases that we're going to take. Somebody doesn't walk in our office and we agree to just go ahead and file the claim. We look into it and make a determination as to whether or not, one, we feel like it's a valid claim because we're under a license in order to do that. And second of all, whether or not we believe that we can actually help them. There are cases out there that I see that, okay, you may have a valid argument or you feel very passionate about it, but I don't think that we can win your case. And so we're very honest about that kind of thing. But I 100% respect your perspective. I am going to address the sleep apnea when we get back. I am going to address the sleep apnea cases here when we get back because we get running up against a hard break at the at the hour here. We'll be right back with the Veteran's Voice, and I'm going to address the sleep apnea. This is Amanda Manier at 790 KABC with the Veteran's Voice. Good evening. This is Amanda Manier with the Veteran's Voice here on 790 KABC. I am a veteran advocate and attorney at the Veterans Law Group, and we work in practicing and helping veterans work their case through the VA, navigate their case through the VA bureaucratic system to get their disability compensation. It is all we do. We've been doing it for over 25 years. One of the great things that I love about hosting this show is I have the opportunity to not only have guests on sometimes where we're talking about other organizations that are helping veterans, experts in the industry doing things that we're not doing, or sometimes even that we are doing. I had a great colleague on last week with Aaron who helped with some discharge upgrade questions, that kind of thing. But my favorite thing to do is to take your calls when we're here live, and we are here live this evening. Take your calls as a veteran or a family member of a veteran, or just maybe somebody who doesn't understand the process, would like to know more about it or how they can help. We're here at 800-222-KABC. That is 800-222-5222. If you've got a question and you want to join us, you can also submit a question via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We also have a YouTube channel. Kind of keep track of those. Looks like we've got a couple of questions that have come in that I'm happy to address. Before we went to the break, though, if you were listening, we were talking with David out in Pasadena. He is a veteran, a Vietnam veteran. He's also been through the process himself. He also worked for the VA and had some positive things to say, but also some frustrations about, the VA system and, some of the people that, and I've heard this before. I've talked a lot with people who work with the VA. I look at my job as being responsible for representing a veteran to the best of my ability, making it super easy for the VA to grant their case. As I mentioned before, we take everything on contingency, which means we evaluate every case and determine whether or not we feel like we can help the veteran. We definitely don't just take every case that gets called, the people that call us, and figure out a way to do it. I love to be able to say to every one of our clients, when they get frustrated with the VA or they're, just trying to decide, should I just give up? Is this even worth it? That I know when we took their case, it's because we believe in their case. So it's one of the great things of working in this particular industry and the way that we do work at the Veterans Law Group. But I wanted to address something that was brought up before the break. If you're somebody out there who's a veteran that's dealing with sleep apnea, there's a lot of sleep apnea I kind of call for lack of better terminology, the redheaded stepchild of the VA. When they opened up that ability to file for sleep apnea, if you're diagnosed with sleep apnea, they determine that it is related to service, which means you had symptoms in service or it's a secondary condition, and you're ordered a CPAP, you're diagnosed a CPAP or prescribed a CPAP, it's a 50% rating. There's a lot of other disabilities out there that are really hard to get to 50%. So to give an example, a back injury, a 40% is a high rating. That's a pretty debilitating back injury if you're rated at 40. So sleep apnea has been at 50 if you have a CPAP. And I think that the VA, they've even talked about it for years of changing that rating. All ratings are statutory. If you have certain symptoms or certain range of motion, by statute, they give you a percentage. It's not a subjective percentage that's given by the examiner or the person or the veteran service representative who is, determining what percentage you should have. It's very much by statute. So when it comes to sleep apnea, there's a couple different things to look at. One, it is often known as a condition that develops due to weight gain, but that is not always the case. It is a physical manifestation of, you have a physical disability that causes you to stop breathing at night is what happens. Yes, that can happen because of weight gain, but it doesn't always happen because of weight gain. So there's that thing. There's also there was an influx, and I think the VA just got frustrated with it and just started denying a whole bunch of claims when it came to sleep apnea. But if you had, during the time in service, you started developing crazy snoring, stopping breathing at night, waking up choking, Many of these things have often, I mentioned earlier that there's the Agent Orange thing that has happened for years and years of Vietnam veterans were exposed to a chemical that we put out there. We have now realized it's caused so many different conditions, including Parkinson's, diabetes, hypertension, ischemic heart disease. The burn pits is something from the Iraq and Middle East tour there, or theater there, that is, they're starting to recognize more and more breathing problems, sinusitis, those kind of things. I also do thoroughly expect them to eventually start recognizing things with regards to sleep apnea because of that. Then there's another way it goes around that, is there are a lot of studies out there, medical studies, that identify that one of the very, very common side effects of dealing with PTSD, depression, anxiety is weight gain. In addition to that, if you have knee injuries and back injuries that are affecting your ability to exercise, you put on weight because of that. There's a lot of other disabilities that cause you to put on weight. And that then becomes a problem with sleep apnea. That's another way of going about getting service connected for sleep apnea. So there's a bunch of different approaches. Not all of them work. There's certainly people who have contacted us that, they served in the 70s and they didn't serve in Vietnam, or they didn't serve in combat and now have sleep apnea in, their 70s, and they want to file a claim for that, or they filed a claim and got denied. And we decide, you know what, we just don't think we can help you. So we're always going to be very honest with feedback to our people who contact us as to whether or not you've got a claim or you don't have a claim. So I just wanted to address that. If you're dealing with a sleep apnea claim or a PTSD claim, or any of these claims, I have certain topics that I want to talk about or that I kind of note to talk about. But if you're out there and you're listening and you've got a question about your claim and you want to reach out to me and I can answer very specifically your question or generally for the public, please reach out to us at 800-222-5222. And I mentioned earlier, you can also submit a claim via our Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. If you search Veterans Law Group, you will find us there. Same thing with YouTube. And I want to get to one of those questions. It was a very interesting question that was submitted to us through Facebook. And it gets back a little bit to the C&P exams that I was talking about. And this veteran, I will keep his name private, but he says that he is 100% combined total and permanent. But the VA had called him to do a Cnp exam for his PTSD. And when he called them, he asked, why do I have an exam? And he brought up the fact that he was total and permanent, and they said he still had to do it. And he's worried that if his PTSD rating goes down from the 70%, it will remove his 100% overall. So as I mentioned before, when you go in for your examination to get rated, each individual disability is rated based upon the statute, and then they do what we call VA math, where they take each of those, they put it into this calculation, this chart that they have, and they determine what your overall disability is, and that's what determines how much money you're paid on a monthly basis. So when this guy says that this veteran says that he is 100% combined total and permanent, at some point in time, he received a 100% rating, and they told him that it was what we call permanent and total, P&T. When the VA says that, what they're saying is that they're not going to take away your 100%. They're not going to call you back in for a new examination, that you should be able to receive that 100% for the rest of your life. So that's why he's asking, why am I being called in for a C&P examination? Couple of things that I would say to him. And if you're listening, I don't know if you're listening, but if you're listening, I would say a couple things. One, the VA makes mistakes all the time. And so it really comes down to, like, when you have access like we do to the VA electronic system, they call it VBMS, we can see notes, we can see stuff that happens. And sometimes it's just a matter of, they have these automatic, like what I call workflows, that when they issue a decision, it will automatically kind of create a task for the future to say, call this person in for an examination. So unless you're considered permanent and total, which is 100% for the rest of your life, they have the ability to call you back in any time to be re-examined for any of those disabilities that you get rated for. I would say in my experience, they typically, if they're going to call you back in, usually call you in about 3 to 5 years. And almost always, again, when I see them, is once they determine that second examination, that you still have the same rating, they might do one more. If not, they'll mark it as a permanent disability and then move on. So I would say to this particular person, I'm going to call him Ben. When Ben goes to this examination, one, I wouldn't go to the examination without having representation. I would first have your representative try to reach out to the VA to kind of clarify and make sure that they know that you're considered permanent and total. That's what we've done for many of our clients. We always maintain power of attorney on clients, even when we get them the maximum benefit, so that we can handle issues like that. I would bet it's almost always going to be either that there's a mistaken understanding about the permanent and total, or that the VA just straight out made a mistake. The other issue comes up is with TDIU, which we alluded to before. One of our callers talked about TDIU. It's total disability based on individual unemployability. When we get back from the break, I'd like to address that. There's a few things that are a little bit of nuances that people think that if they're permanent and total with TDIU, they'll never have the TDIU taken away, which is actually a little bit inaccurate. So I want to address that when we get back. If you're listening in and have a question for us and want to call in, anything to do with VA disability claims, 800-222-5222, or if you just have a comment or a question, I'm more than happy to address that. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice. I'm a veteran attorney and advocate, and I am the happy host here to help veterans and their families across the country. Good evening. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice. I am a veteran advocate and an attorney at the Veterans Law Group, and I have the pleasure of working every day with veterans, helping them with their VA disability claims. We also have an amazing staff of paralegals and other attorneys who are veterans. Many of them have been through the process. Others are family members of veterans and have been through the process, standing hand to hand with the veteran they're trying to help. One of the things I love to do with this show here is definitely interview guests, bring you guys as resources, but one of my favorite things is to answer questions of veterans or their family members who are out there listening, who are struggling with the VA process and would like to, ask a question, get my perspective on it, or just have a conversation about some of the things that are going on out there that are helping veterans. If you'd like to join us, you can call in at 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-KABC. You can also submit some questions on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. If you just search for Veterans Law Group, you should be able to find us there. We're pretty easy to find. One of the things I wanted to address before we went to break, I was talking with, I was reviewing one of the submissions on Facebook that was one of the questions about the potential of being reduced from once you get your 100% permanent and total rating, and the VA had contacted him and said, hey, you need to come in for a new examination. And one of the things I just wanted to make sure that is understood is when you go into the VA and you ask, you're essentially asking for help. You're asking for compensation for your disability. So you do have to participate in the process. You need to go to your exams. If you don't go to your exams, they're just going to deny you. And once you're rated, the VA does have the ability, unless you're considered a permanent rating, they have the ability to call you in pretty much at any time to be re-examined. In my experience, I generally see re-exams usually 3 to 5 years out. They'll go back in and they'll say, okay, they're looking at two things. One, has your condition improved? Or if it hasn't, has it worsened? So even if you don't file a request for an increase, you can get an increase if you go through some of these routine exams. Most examinations right now are done by private contracted physicians through QTC, VES. There's a bunch of different organizations across the country that are doing these re-exams. But one of the things that also we talked with somebody earlier today about, they had a 90% rating, but an overall of 100% based on TDIU. So TDIU is total disability based on individual unemployability. All that means is that when the VA goes in and calculates your overall rating based upon your back, your knee, your depression, your neck, and whatever it is that you have, diabetes, and they look at that overall rating and it's less than 100%, if those disabilities or even one of them is affecting your ability to maintain employment, gainful employment as they call it, then they'll pay you at the 100% rating even though you don't have a 100% rating. So that particular person was saying they were being paid at the 100% rating even though they were only 80% overall. So there's not a whole lot of difference between those two. I'd love to take your calls. It looks like we have Tracy in LA. Are you with us? Tracy?
Oh, can you hear me better now?
I can hear you now. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, great. Speakerphone never works. Hi. I'm new to hearing you, but I could almost cry like at the great service that you're providing, because I have a special place in my heart. I don't have any family members who served, but I was married to an Israeli vet he was served 7 years, and I just care deeply and wanted to know how I could be of service, how I could volunteer.
You know, there are so many organizations around the country that are doing amazing things. And one thing I would say we work with people all over the countries. And my favorite veteran service officers throughout the country are called county veteran service officers. Almost every county in the entire nation has them. And what they know is the resources locally in your area that are helping veterans. So say a veteran is having a problem with like homelessness, or that they need, a quick help, or they need help from the VFW. If you locate your local county veteran service officer, they're going to know all of those resources. So they would know a great place for you to volunteer. The other thing I would tell you is if you're looking at something maybe to support, a couple of months ago, we had on this show Gretchen, who is the founder of Code of Vets. It's CODE of Vets. And if you just look them up, the wonderful thing that she does is that their organization helps veterans and their families who are dealing with like immediate issues. Like, I am going to lose my house, or I'm going to get the electricity turned off and I need $800. And she'll raise that $800 and send it to them to help them, or a surgery, or a homeless veteran getting them put into a home. And then they create like an Amazon wish list. And so people can go onto their Amazon wish list and send them a toaster or in their new home. So check them out. They're amazing. They're a way in which you can help if you don't necessarily have the time. But if you want to help with time, contact the Los Angeles County Veteran Service Office.
Wow, that's super helpful. I didn't even know that these things existed. And, I drive by the VA in Los Angeles, Brentwood area, and I see all these tents outside of the VA, and those buildings have been empty for the most part. I know because I'm in AA, and I've spoken in one of those buildings a long time ago, and I don't get. Anyway, I have lots of feelings about this, but it just seems like these people who served for our country deserve better than what we're giving them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're kind of cutting out a little bit, so I'm going to let you go. But reach out to those resources, and you can always reach out to us too, and we'll point you in the right direction, because there's plenty of need out there, not a lack of need for sure.
Great.
Thank you, Tracy.
So much. Sorry about my telephone.
No problem. Steve in Pasadena, are you still with us?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Steve.
Hi.
What can I do for you?
Well, I'm a 100% disabled veteran, and I wanted to say thank you. You guys are doing a tremendous service. And in my own experience, what I wanted to say is that I believe having an advocate, and you guys are one resource, and like you mentioned, the veteran service officers are another, it's an absolute must to get your your package put together and successfully done. In my case, it was during the paper system where there were a million guys, a million packages in. They've improved since then. But here's my observation of my own experience is this. What I did was I did have an advocate. They're no longer around, the Military Order of the Purple Heart, but they were great. But veteran service offices are good, or your organization. But what I did personally was I obtained forms where you have the option of going to outside physicians, and I found that quite helpful to go to a neurologist or go to go to a psychiatrist. And then what I did for myself is available online, and you guys probably have this too, is for every service-connected disability, there's specific language that the rating officer looks for, chapter and verse. And these guys are military guys. So, when we established what the disability was, whether it was a spinal disability or tinnitus or whatever it was, I asked them, would they please put their findings in the exact language that in the military you call it giving them what they're making their job easier for them. Give it to them in the language that they're trained to see, provided it's legit and it makes the package go so smoothly because there's no question. It's exactly what they've been trained to look for.
Definitely. And thank you so much for that, Steve. And it's so funny that you say that. We were talking earlier about the disability benefits questionnaires, and that's kind of what you're alluding to. I look at it as my job. You're absolutely right, Steve. My job is to make it super easy for the VA to grant the case. And one of the best compliments I ever got from the VA is, we pay attention to your guys' cases because we know if you took it, there's something there and you're going to make it really easy for us. So you're absolutely right, Steve. This is Amanda with the Veterans Voice. It is my honor to be your host and to be an advocate for veterans every single day. Thank you so much. We will see you next Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock.